Welcome. My name is Yujin YAGUCHI, and I'm a professor of U.S. Cultural Studies at the University of Tokyo, and I also serve as the Director of International Education Support Office at the university. This is the first conversation in a series of discussions between the University of Tokyo and Australian National University about the research and education in the so-called post-corona age. In this particular conversation, the individuals who lead the two institutions' global policies will talk about the university education in the pandemic and also explore ways to establish an even more fruitful partnership between the two universities in the post-corona era. The University of Tokyo has had a very productive relationship with the Australian National University for many years. We define ANU as our strategic partner, which means among all the partnerships we have with many good schools in the world, we value the one with ANU as a key to our successful global endeavor. We have ongoing research collaborations in all areas and educational exchanges. From 2014 till the pandemic hit, for example, we had a very active student exchange, specifically sending 33 semester places and accepting 30 semester places, meaning we had students from both sides actively taking advantage of the opportunity to study at each other's classrooms and labs. And hopefully we can resume this soon. Personally, I'm also very proud to say I've been very much involved along with Dr. Simon Haberle of ANU and Dr. Yusuke Yokoyama of University of Tokyo in an annual short-term exchange program between the two institutions, welcoming a group of students from ANU for about 2 weeks in January and sending our students to Canberra in February. We had to shift to online last year and we'll do so again this school year, but we hope to be returning to in-person experience in the future. In this program, our students have studied together on issues that involved climate and geological changes and indigenous history and politics. And more importantly, throughout the experience, bonded and formed a very strong friendship. ANU, thus, is a very special school for all of us at the University of Tokyo. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the three people joining this session today. Dr. Sally Wheeler is Deputy Vice-Chancellor of ANU, focusing in the realm of international strategy. She's also the Dean of the ANU College of Law. I can't imagine how one balances the Vice-Chancellorship and Deanship. It's so impressive. Prior to taking up these positions at ANU, Dr. Wheeler was a professor and Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Research and Enterprise at Queen's University, Belfast. She's a leading scholar of law and corporate governance with many publications and awards. Mr. Jonathan Dampney is the Director of the International Office of ANU. He's involved in strategic and policy advice on the development, implementation, and management of global partnerships and management of the university's strategic alliances. Mr. Dampney is originally from Sydney, but has lived in Canberra for many years, including, I believe, as a student, as well as an administrative official of the university, and writes he could never go back after coming to appreciate how easy life is in Canberra. I must say, though my limited experience in Australia has been mostly confined to Canberra, and I don't claim to possess a good framework of reference, I agree with you. And Dr. Kaori Hayashi is the Executive Vice President in charge of Global Affairs and Diversity Issues of the University of Tokyo. She's my boss, the best kind you can ask for. I think she has the most challenging job at the university because she is tasked with two areas that the University of Tokyo must seriously address if it were to maintain its integrity as a leading institution of higher education in Japan. Her career encompasses life and research experiences across the world, including many years in Germany and the United States. She's a leading scholar of media and journalism with numerous publications in English, German, and Japanese, especially touching on the subject of gender and minority politics and representations. So from here, I want to open up our conversation by asking you some questions, and I think we will just go with the flow and see how it goes for the rest of the time for the next.
Dr. Yaguchi, you have to introduce yourself.
Oh, well, as I said,
why not?
I'm a professor at the University of Tokyo. I've been very much involved in globalization, internationalization project of the university for years, and amongst many responsibilities in that area is that I look after the inbound students and outbound students to promote globalization of our campuses.
Thank you.
Okay, So I'm gonna ask this question, and then we can just start by having this dialogue. But first question I had was how your institution in Tokyo met or are meeting the educational challenges amidst the pandemic, and how you responded to the needs of the students, faculty, and staff. I know that the list is long, but if you could just provide a summary of what sort of things have been done at your institution, that would be great. Can we start with Dr. Wheeler?
Sure. Let me begin by saying that ANU also values very much its strategic partnership with UTokyo. And we're very proud of that partnership, and also that I speak to you from the lands of the Ngunnawal Ngambri people, territory never ceded and taken by fiat. So I think ANU started with a series of guiding principles that staff and student welfare would have to come first and should come first, that we would try and maintain very good quality communication, so that we thought through that we would be able to kind of mitigate anxiety and distress and confusion. And we also appointed a COVID response lead. We appointed a recently retired Air Vice Marshal, who was a military and aerospace medicine specialist, Professor Tracy Smart. And she became our public health lead, and she ran something called the COVID Response Office. And so everything went into her office and out of her office. In terms of expressly student support, obviously Australia shut its international borders, meaning that some international students couldn't come back. But it also meant that some international students were effectively trapped in Australia on that border closure, and still are, a lot of them. And so one thing we did was to introduce bursaries to support them and domestic students, because international students were not eligible for any government support. And as lockdown came, a lot of them that would have supported themselves through working lost their jobs. So we set out to support them. We also changed our grading requirements, so that students, instead of taking the mark for a course, could simply take a course requirement satisfied grade, which meant that if they had dropped in numerical terms, they were not going to be affected by that. We also changed the date by which students had to commit to paying for courses. That's normally 5 or 6 weeks after semester commenced. And we pushed that date further forward so that students could try online. For students outside Australia, and actually within Australia but outside Canberra, it was a question of what their internet connection was going to be like. How quick could they adjust to online learning? Did they have a place where they could study? For students who were out of Canberra when this happened, they hadn't necessarily thought they were going to be doing their degree there. So those are the sorts of things that we put in place to help our students.
I see. So you centralized the information about the COVID policy on campus, and you responded to the various needs of the students. Mr. Dampney, did you have other things to add?
Look, I think Sally's covered that pretty well. I think the challenge was around how to shift to online education. There's aspects of the university that have done that before, but there's the ANU, probably like the University of Tokyo, has tended to be very much a research-led teaching environment, and that really requires face-to-face kind of teaching. So I think adapting to that online teaching was a huge impost on our academic staff, but picked up incredibly fast, like many institutions around the world, and done amazingly well given the short amount of time and the shift having to do some of these things from home with little support as well.
If I may, would you clarify the reason why you changed the sort of grading system? Is it because the students found it harder to take classes online?
We thought some of them might, and we thought some of them would be worried that, particularly if they wanted to go on for scholarships for postgrad study or competitive jobs, that they would be worried that there would be a drop in their grades. And it was really just to ease their stress about that. In actual fact, relatively few students opted for that as an option, but we thought rather than them simply saying, that's it, I'm going to take the semester off, we would try and keep them in. And given that this pandemic has now lasted 4 semesters, I'm really glad we did that.
I have also a question about this. If I understand correctly, you have this trial system that the students can try the first 5 or 6 weeks
That's right.
to check whether they can be successful at your university. So if they feel that they can't manage it, they can withdraw the admission, or
that's right.
Ah, oh, interesting. We don't have
so
that.
we never, even in a non-pandemic time, know quite what our student numbers are going to be until after census date.
I see. So what is the average percentage of the students who withdraw their first withdraw their studentship after the trial? Do you have any?
So I'm a lawyer, and law is very hard to get into. And the overwhelming majority of students, once they're in, stay in.
Okay.
I'm not sure what it is for other colleges and other courses, but for me, it would.
Oh, looks like we've just lost Sally there. I think what Sally was saying would reflect across the university. The dropout rate is generally very low, and is usually more where students, something unexpected happens, I suppose, and they're not able to continue their studies.
Yeah.
But usually that our continuation or enrollment rate and our retention rate is generally very high.
The reason why I asked is whether the rate rose because of the pandemic or not.
Yeah, I'm not certain whether the rate increased with the pandemic. I think it's probably stayed fairly similar. There might be a slightly higher increase of students that dropped out before that census date, who found the online learning situation a challenge for a variety of reasons. It may be because of the shift to online, but also, I think as Sally mentioned, we have students who've had issues with connectivity and being able to access all the resources and things like that. So there's a few reasons why students may have found it challenging.
Thank you. Professor Hayashi, would you like to explain our situation at the University of Tokyo, how we responded to the challenges?
Yes, sure. Thank you. And thank you for organizing this workshop. And this is a great chance for me as a newly appointed executive vice president to learn what the situation, COVID-19, how the pandemic situation is, and how the university outside of Japan cope with it. And I have also learned quite much from Professor Wheeler's statements. And let me explain a little bit about our situation. The University of Tokyo managed to shift to online teaching system without delaying the start of a school year in April 2020. Many other schools in Japan delayed their start at that time, but we have managed to start on time. So the successful transition was largely due to the really a personal effort and also our resources at the university and also faculty and administrative effort in making sure that student academic life will not disrupt it. So this is also in line with the ANU's policy that student welfare comes first. And for example, our university assisted students by lending computers and also Wi-Fi routers to those who needed them. And we were also able to make sure that no students left behind and because of the infrastructure. So we also held multiple workshops for faculty members like myself to familiarize them with the online teaching system such as Zoom. So it's really incredible that so many faculty members at the moment can use Zoom without further problems and complications.
Just to add to this, our school year begins in April.
Yes.
The beginning of the semester, and the pandemic kind of became really serious in March. So until February, very few faculty members, if any, had any idea what teaching online meant. So we had to scramble in a matter of 2 weeks or so to teach everything online. Sorry to have interrupted. Please go ahead.
We were really not sure whether we can begin the school at all at that time. Yeah. But by now, most of the administrative meetings are held online and mostly successful. A good example is that we vote. We held a president election back in 2020 electronically. So we had an electronic vote for the first time in our history of the University of Tokyo and elected the President Fujii, and it went successfully. And that's another incredible, amazing achievement we had. And also the university also established a task force comprising of members of the executive board and also medical specialists to centralize the university's policy regarding the virus. And also we had online teaching and learning, and it has been, we have been doing quite successfully. But we have also concern. For example, there's a Zoom fatigue, and also especially from students, they have a desire for more in-person interactions. And also there are contents that are very difficult to cover, conveying online, such as lab experiments as well. So there is a concern over how to give online exams too. And there are also active discussions going on about these matters, and hopefully they will be incorporated in the post-corona pedagogy. But we have quite many challenges in future how to implement these new type of pedagogies into our normal curriculums. And also, we also encourage online learning, and but we also encourage students partly to come on campus, because just like now, the wave of corona inflicted, the number of the corona inflicted patients subsided. So we sometimes say, okay, we can let students come to the campus and do their activities too. And we also allow students to do extracurricular activities on campus too. But in order to make it more safely, we invented a new app system. And this system was introduced already last year for entering the campus to keep track of the health condition of the university community. And also with this tracking system, this year we also held the graduation and entrance ceremonies in person. And we also conducted advanced testing for everyone wishing to attend. So these are some of the challenges and trials we have done in the past 2 years.
Thank you. So unlike ANU, our campus has a wall around. we have gates, so we can close the gates. Whereas I've been to your campus, and I know that's possible. So that's one key difference. I think we can control the traffic on campus much more easily than you can.
Yeah, but then okay, sure, please.
Sorry, I was just going to say one of the other challenges we have, and I'm sure Sally can speak to this as well, is that we have a very large number of our students that live on campus. So usually we would have somewhere around 5,000 students living on our campus. And so our COVID response had to take into consideration those students as well, and their health and well-being while they're on campus. So it increases the challenge, I think.
And I think that's been particularly so in the very first outbreak of the virus back in March, April 2020, because those students had just arrived. No one knew how long it was going to take. And also in our last lockdown, those students were already back for the start of semester, and then lockdown began. At one point, they were all confined to very small areas of the hall, and we had a conveyor belt of around 60 staff packing grocery boxes for them. They could put in orders, and we had a huge lecture theatre converted into literally a grocery store, and we would pack them their stuff and deliver it. But making sure that they were not socially isolated, and that they had things to do beyond study. We've had our well-being teams. We've converted to sort of online student clubs, online yoga, online Netflix, as well as online study. We also had 3,000 students who were international students who were unable to return to Australia. And that, I think, brought other challenges. For those students, they had to decide whether they were going to carry on and be educated in Australia, or whether they were going to try and move their education to a country that was open. They have been, that group of students, incredibly loyal to ANU and stayed with us. And we, for our part, have set up overseas study hubs where they can come together. They have some social activities that we've put on. We've also used them as a way of securing those students' workplace placements and internships through alumni, so that they have something different to focus on. So a lot of them have actually had considerable work experience now and then studied in the evenings. And that has worked quite well. But that is down to the fantastic staff that we employ overseas, who just pivoted almost overnight to sourcing all of the things they needed and rolling them out and delivering them.
So, well, thank you. So we've actually transitioned to the next question that I wanted to ask is, how has the pandemic affected your international students? And obviously very much on your side and our side, and you've introduced to us some of the efforts being done at ANU. But so there are students who, so there are two categories of students who are unable to return to their places of origin, and students who are unable to enter Australia. So they're
yes.
Yes. And those who are unable to enter Australia, this is coming to be like 2 years of. So your undergraduate degree can be finished in, I understand, three years.
It can be. Not that many students do, but it can be. But some of our master's students, we have quite a few, particularly in the business and economics area, 2-year master's courses. Some of those students will just have started, and actually now will be just finishing, some of them never having been to Australia.
Right, that is, we have the same problem that April 2020 was the first pandemic breakout, and then it will be almost 2 years since then. And our master's students who are still, I think we have more than 1,000 students, 1,400 or something overseas, and they were unable to, they've been unable to come to Japan. And part of them are master's students, so they finish our degree without being taking any step to, on the university campus. And we have to decide now how we can, how do you say, compensate, or it's not, the compensate is not the appropriate word, but yeah, this is a very peculiar situation actually. I don't know how you cope with this.
So we're planning graduation ceremonies in some of the cities where our students are most congregated. Shanghai being, for example, would be one of them. But it's most unlikely that anyone from ANU will be able to travel because obviously there are the state you're traveling to will have quarantine requirements as well as the Australian one. So we have not yet decided whether we will be conferring degrees remotely or whether some of our staff in those countries will do this. It's and the idea that we like all our students to think they're part of the ANU family, but how we make that family work for students that have never actually physically been to Australia, that's an interesting challenge.
Yes, same with us.
And you said you have you set up like a, is it like a gathering or community of students in places where your international students are concentrated? Like I suppose.
Yeah, we set up facilities in Shanghai, Chengdu, Shenzhen, Beijing, and also a bit in Shandong, where we had study spaces. Spaces where they could definitely connect to Wi-Fi. We had ANU alumni there who could help, because some of these students had never had an ANU induction. They were trying to use ANU learning systems, never having been on campus. So we had some support for them to do that. We didn't do any teaching. We didn't beam any we didn't try to do any teaching into those hubs, but it gave them a physical location, and some students came every day. We arranged lots of careers talks. We had lots of social activities. We had visits to large Chinese companies, etc. So, for example, the Shanghai hub has had just under 1,000 students use it this semester from August until now. So it's taken a long time to build that traction. In the first few weeks, we just saw the same 20 faces, but we've built it up and built it up.
And so you have local staff members in Shanghai and the cities that you just mentioned?
We had an office in Beijing, and the director of that office recruited staff in each city and took on commercial premises to run these student hubs. I should say my staff director in Beijing is just fantastic. Nothing ever phases her. I could ask her for a staff hub on Mars and she'd probably say, yeah, we can do that. It'll just take a few extra days.
We need someone like that here. Wow. And the students who are unable to leave Australia, how are they coping? How are they doing on your campus? Are they able to continue living on your campus, or?
Yes. So they have continued living on our campus. If they can go elsewhere in Australia, etc., or get an exit permit, then obviously that's fine. But a lot of them have carried on living on campus. For large parts of this 2 years, we have been open with face-to-face teaching and student activities. And we have done our absolute best to make sure that they feel it's a home from home. But it has been tough. It has been very hard on them. Some of them separated from families, etc.
I see. Professor Hayashi, would you like to share what we're doing for our international students?
First of all, maybe I have the impression that Australia has stricter measures against coronavirus.
Much stricter.
Much stricter than Japan. So that's the big difference from the premises. We've been able to, for example, go shopping and also enjoy extracurricular activities. The students also play baseball outside and so on. So that's, I think, a major difference, right? Of course, it's not, having said that, we do have a lot of problems. Actually, many of our international students, because I also run English medium program just until last year. And many of them who are in Japan feel quite cut off and isolated because they have not been able to return home as a result of condition back in their country or fear of not being able to return. And we try to offer a variety of information and services, including counseling, but of course, online resources are not always sufficient. And I think our counseling has been very busy, but we are not sure whether everybody who need counseling came and also did their counseling, use their counseling service, use our counseling service. We also quite much worried about students who are unable to join our university community in person because of the border closure, as I said. And there are still, I think, more than 1,000 students who are still waiting for their student visa to be issued. And they are taking courses online, and we try our best not to disrupt their study plan, but it is not easy to be at the University of Tokyo without having made a step on our campus. And of course, we have to take time differences in consideration, and many students from Europe and United States, they have to be up at odd hours and so on. So we are also in consultation with other universities in Japan and the Ministry of Education to encourage the government to allow more students to come. And I really hope that everyone admitted to our school will be able to come to Tokyo as soon as possible. And at the same time, we took advantage of the online learning system, which was quite new to us, but we could also invite students from abroad to join us our online programs for our online short-term programs. In fact, we just coincidentally, we launched a summer school this year. We didn't expect that we will have a COVID-19, but we have planned quite for years to launch this summer school system. And we did this for the as a first year online. And we were able to attract registration from 17 nations. I think it would have been quite difficult to do this if we were expecting all of them physically to come to Japan. And additionally, the pandemic has interrupted our outbound programs, which means that we were not able to send students abroad for more than a year. And this has deprived many students of their chances to experience a different society and culture and study at a different school in a different language. And so we have been struggling to get our students interested in studying abroad, and pandemic has had determinal effect on our goal of increasing our outbound students. So we are quite much concerned and realize that we need to redouble our effort in the post-corona age. So it has been quite the tendency at the University of Tokyo that many students are, sometimes they say, okay, I'm content with studying only in Japan. So we always have been encouraging students to go abroad, but this initiative was disrupted because of the COVID-19. And we have to restart again. And I'm not sure how we can really rekindle this type of initiative.
So sorry.
So I was just going to say, we're in a similar situation that we haven't been able to send students out for exchange and study abroad and short courses. We did manage to send a small group of students to New Zealand when we had a travel bubble, which was, I think a really positive thing, although we have to get them back now from New Zealand, which may prove challenging. But we have quite a long history of sending students out. Of the Australian universities, we probably send the highest proportion of our students overseas each year. And I think we've started to run information sessions for next year, and we have huge levels of interest already from students. So I think from our perspective, that's one thing that is probably kept going, I guess, through the pandemic, that while students haven't been able to travel, the desire to do so is still there. And I expect we'll increase that very rapidly once our borders open.
Dr. Wheeler, you had a statement.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Jonathan said. I mean, study abroad is huge at ANU. And in fact, if you ask students sometimes, why did you choose a program at the Australian National University, they will say, well, because it has fantastic study abroad opportunities, and I desperately want to go to Europe or to the US or anywhere else, etc. And that has been a huge restriction. I mean, I sometimes think that, oh, it's only 20 months, it's not that bad. But when you think, if you're 18, that is a substantial proportion of your life, and you will have been looking forward to it for quite some time. Students can often tell you on the first couple of days where they want that international experience to be. And a lot of them will go overseas in university vacations as well. So, I mean, that has delivered, I think COVID has delivered to them a university experience, certainly not the one that a lot of them were expecting.
Right.
Well, we've always enjoyed hosting students from your institution, and we certainly hope they will come once it becomes possible.
They'll be there. Don't you worry. They'll definitely be there.
That's great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed teaching ANU students back. When was that? Back in 2019, right?
Yes, you gave a lecture too.
Yes, it was really interesting, and they were very responsive and energetic, active participants.
I think the University of Tokyo would be one of our lead partners for student mobility, both through formal exchange, but also through sort of the programs that Yujin talked about, where we bring groups of students. So yeah, we'd certainly hope that after this, we could welcome more of your students, and we'd encourage them to come and visit us at ANU.
And that's obviously very important for us. Our students tend to come from a not all, but a fairly similar background, uniform background, and it's really critical for them to leave our campus and experience a place and people of different values and background and language. This is something that we really need to work hard on. Professor Hayashi is also in charge of diversity, and our university at the undergraduate level is 80% male students and 20% female students, and this is an issue of grave concern for all of us. We need our students to go see universities across the world and see how anomalous our situation is and what needs to be addressed. That's one of the many reasons why we need our students to leave and experience different campus life. Professor Hayashi, sorry, you had something you wanted to add?
No, actually, well, some of our students really feel they can't afford to wait until everything is finished. So they really want
right
to
now,
go
actually,
outside.
yeah, right now, actually, some of our students have started doing study abroad to the destinations where they are accepting international students. So Australia and New Zealand are closed, but North American destinations and European destinations are open. So some of our students have opted to go to those places. And Japan is not open to exchange students, and we hope both the Japanese borders and Australian borders will open before too long to resume the traffic between the two. Perhaps I'll just, we don't have to cover all the questions that I've prepared, but I'll just move on to the next question, maybe sort of talking in general about the research aspects of the university, sort of positive, if there are any like positive impacts and detrimental impacts, and what are the kind of some of the things that are taking place at ANU as well as at UTokyo. If you could give me some examples, that would be great.
So I think the actual periods of lockdown have been pretty hard for researchers. As we touched on earlier, there is some research that's virtually impossible to do from home, lab-based research, anything that requires high-end big computing, etc. For people homeschooling children is very hard. But I do think that some things have become much more popular and much more viable. So talking to people around the world on Zoom, virtual conferences staged across time zones, that would have been impossible. We would all have flown for 3 days before and had probably a much narrower experience. So from that point of view, I do think there have been upsides. We've seen publishers making a lot of their material either discounted or free available online, more resources coming online. And I think maybe some new collaborations have been formed between people. I think maybe we have started to focus very much more on the world's challenges and problems. So for example, in this period, ANU is committed to being carbon negative by 2030. And that's something that has really hammered home. You said that you'd elected a president virtually. I don't think we've done anything as exciting as that, but we have put together a new ANU 2025 strategy. And the research arm of that is research that transforms society and creates national capability. And I think we have reflected much more on our national responsibilities and our national capability during the shutdown period, and either being shut in Australia or shut out of other places. That has intensified our focus. So it's not been all bad. It has produced some upsides. When it started, I thought it would be a disaster. But there are some things that I think, well, that's good. I hope we can hang on to that. So.
Thank you. We actually vote every 6 years. It's not exactly an election, but it's a kind of expression of interest among, or expression of preference among faculty members. But it's a de facto election. So we did it electronically before our government. Our voting system is not electronic, so we preempted the government election system. But anyway. Professor Hayashi, would you like to share what we're doing in terms of kind of research?
The positive actions
positive or negative impact, or efforts to address those.
Well, first of all, I have never dreamt of doing that type of election electronically in my entire career life. Actually, University of Tokyo was not. It's not a university who is very, so to say, how do you say, receptive to this type of electronic communication. For example, doctoral thesis judgment reviews, we have only done in person. But nowadays, we have introduced a Zoom reviewing system, Zoom reviewing sessions. So, and that way we can invite scholars outside of Japan. And we can diversify our reviewers. And I think this also contributes to the betterment of or the betterment of the quality of a scholarship. So I think that's one positive side, I would say. And also, of course, not only the dissertation reviews, but also the online system makes it all easier for many activities and invite people of different locations and circumstances and to join. And of course, it's not the same as an in-person format, but I think we can hold meetings quite easily from all over the world. Also, also in Tokyo, we don't have to commute so long for some people, and that's a positive side. Of course, there are many negative sides. I think we do need in-person meetings and in-person talks, and also there are, as I said, areas where we cannot dispense with the in-person laboratory experiments and so on. So, yeah. Professor Yaguchi, do you think of any other good, active, positive?
I think faculty members have managed to cope with the situation, given the kind of resources that they have. I think our concern, especially during this pandemic, has been especially for students, because they seem to be the most affected, much more so than the faculty members. Perhaps I'll just ask the final wrap-up questions, which is about kind of responsibilities of university in the post-corona age in terms of education and research, and what kind of plans, some examples that both institutions have for the future as we continue our relationship into the post-pandemic period. If Dr. Wheeler could share your thought, that'd be great.
I think the pandemic has highlighted what universities are for, their true value, what they're good at. Universities have been at the forefront of fighting the pandemic, at the forefront of developing vaccines, giving correct information about the value of masks, about transmission patterns, etc. And I think, unlike a lot of the world's politicians and political systems, universities have retained people's trust. If you were to do a global values poll, I think we would find that people trusted information that came out of universities in a way that they perhaps don't trust information from other sources. And I think that's really important. I think universities have banded together across the globe, and I think that's really important as well. We've shown that there needs to be a global dimension to solving an awful lot of our problems. At the same time, I think we have been under a lot of pressure as universities. There are debates about the value of free speech in our universities. There are debates about the role of public expenditure in our universities. And I think far too often we have undervalued ourselves. And what we should be saying now is, we came through in the pandemic. It's the knowledge, it's the research, the goodwill that we have between us that has really pushed the world through the pandemic. And we're organizations that have long-term visions, that see challenges coming and can offer solutions to wicked problems in perhaps the way that politicians can't. They offer short-term political solutions. We can hope to inform those and offer a different sort of perspective.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Mr. Dampney, did you have anything to add?
I mean, I think that's a good wrap up, but I think just to kind of reiterate what Sally said, that in some ways the pandemic highlighted the importance of international collaboration, the way that we were able to address the challenges of the pandemic is because we were talking to each other, we were sharing information, we had these collaborations that had existed before, and so we were able to communicate these things. And I think it's a great case study of how to deal with these kind of global challenges, and climate is obviously the other one that's, you know, very much hanging over us now and very topical at the moment, that requires a global approach and requires these sorts of collaborations. So yes, it's great that we can do these over Zoom and it enables things that we weren't able to do otherwise. But at the same time, we also need to have the connections between academics and researchers that can share share information and try and address some of these challenges.
Thank you. Professor Hayashi?
Yes, I can't agree more with what's been said now by Professor Wheeler and Dr. Dampney. And I think, yes, with the COVID-19, we for the first time, maybe for many of us, for the first time, we realized that there is such thing as a global crisis, and of this proportion. And for that, we need a global approach, as Jonathan said, and we have to negotiate and bridge all the global values, and we try to keep our global community and try to find a solution together. So for that, I really embrace, for example, such strategic partnership with Australian National University and also other leading institutions of the world. And yes, it makes me really feel that it is such an important thing to have global partners around the globe to cope with this global crisis. That's my, I mean, this is something quite taken for granted, but with this COVID-19, it really made me realize how important it is to embrace the global partnership.
Thank you. Thank you. With that statement, I think our conversation gives a great path for our colleagues to follow this dialogue. Three more dialogues to come between the two institutions, and it just shows how important it is to have this relationship with the ANU and UTokyo to continue and flourish in the post-pandemic era. I personally looking forward to going back to Canberra and enjoying the time there. And,
you know what? I have never been to Canberra.
Oh, really?
As soon as we're open, you must come. You must come.
What about you? Have you been to Tokyo?
I haven't, and I would absolutely love to. So
we have a reason to combat COVID-19 now.
We have many reasons to resume the in-person exchanges, as well as continue this online and ongoing relationship. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining today. And this is going to be the first, but not the last conversation that we will be having in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's been really an honor.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Bye.